The air was heavy with the scent of earth. Tall trees towered above, their leaves fluttering in the soft breeze. The alien stood still, observing the vast blue sky stretching endlessly in front of her. She had been sent to this planet for one purpose: to spy on humans. She had no interest in their lives or their odd habits. Her mission was clear. She had to study them, report back to her people, and learn everything about these strange beings. Her name was Lyra, and she was a scout. From a distant planet, trained for missions just like this. Her people had watched Earth for centuries, but now they needed first-hand information. Lyra was the perfect candidate, intelligent, resourceful, and completely objective. No human emotion could cloud her judgment, and her training had prepared her for everything. Or so she thought. Her ship had landed in a secluded forest, far from any human civilization. Lyra's plan was simple: observe from the shadows. She was to blend in, learn, and return with the intelligence her people needed. Her mission had a strict time limit, several months at most. There was no room for error, and failure meant the end of her career, possibly even her life. As she made her way deeper into the woods, Lyra's mind raced. She had no idea what to expect. She had studied Earth's history, its culture, and its people in theory. But this was different. Being here, standing on the soil of this planet, made everything feel more real. And as she moved through the trees, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of excitement, something she wasn't supposed to feel. Her emotions were supposed to be under control, but the beauty of the planet, its serenity, seemed to tug at something deep inside her. Lyra quickly shook off the feeling. She was here to complete a job, not to get distracted by the beauty of the world. As she stepped into a clearing, she could see a small town in the distance. It was a typical Earth settlement. Houses made of wood and stone, roads paved with asphalt, and people moving about in the streets. They seemed busy, their lives moving in a never-ending cycle. The alien made her way to the outskirts of the town, where she could watch without being noticed. She was careful to hide her appearance from the humans. They wouldn't understand what she was, and that could jeopardize her mission. Instead, she cloaked herself in a simple Earth outfit, blending in with the locals. She had practiced her disguise for months, making sure she could pass as one of them if necessary. Still, she kept her distance. Her mission was to observe, not to interact. For days, Lyra watched the humans from afar, gathering data about their behavior. She noted how they spoke, how they walked, how they interacted with one another. Their emotions were complex: joy, sadness, anger, and love. She was particularly fascinated by how they expressed these emotions. There was one thing that caught her attention more than anything else: their music. Lyra had read about music in her training, but nothing had prepared her for the profound effect it had on humans. She watched as people would gather in parks, on streets, or in their homes, their faces filled with joy as they played or listened to instruments. Some sang, others danced. It was a language that seemed to speak directly to their souls, bypassing their logic and straight to their hearts. Lyra had never experienced anything like it. Her people communicated through data and technology, never needing anything as emotional as music. To her, it seemed like a strange, unscientific thing, full of chaos and noise. But something in her couldn't tear her eyes away from the human gatherings. There was a harmony in their music that resonated deep within her. At first, she dismissed it as a simple curiosity, but as the days went by, it became harder to ignore. One evening, as she walked through the town, she heard a soft melody drifting through the air. It was coming from a small cafe, and the music was unlike anything she had ever heard. The tune was gentle, soothing, and yet it carried a depth of emotion that she couldn't explain. She found herself drawn to it, unable to resist the pull. Lyra sat at the edge of the cafe, hidden in the shadows. She watched as a human played a stringed instrument, their fingers moving effortlessly over the strings. The melody filled the air, wrapping around her like a warm embrace. It was as though the music spoke to her, telling a story without words. Her chest tightened, and for the first time since arriving on Earth, she felt something stir inside her, something powerful and unfamiliar. It was the first time she truly questioned her mission. What was this music? Why did it make her feel this way? She had always been taught to keep emotions at bay, to remain objective and detached. But now, as she sat there, listening to the music, she couldn't help but feel human. For a brief moment, she imagined what it would be like to be part of their world, to live a life where music and emotion were as essential as air. But no. She quickly shook her head. She was here to spy on them, to gather information for her people. Music was just a distraction, a strange little habit that humans had. There was no reason to let it affect her. And yet, as the music lingered in the air, she couldn't help but feel its pull. Maybe there was something more to these humans than she had been taught to believe. She needed to find out. The days passed in a blur, each one blending into the next as Lyra continued her mission. Her observations were becoming more detailed, more thorough. She watched humans laugh, fight, and cry. She noted how their emotions shifted with each passing moment, how their faces lit up with joy or darkened with sorrow. It was both fascinating and overwhelming. But it wasn't just their emotions that fascinated her anymore. It was their music. The more she listened, the more she understood how deeply ingrained it was in their lives. Music was more than just sound to them. It was a language of the soul, a way to express what words could not. It spoke of love, loss, joy, and pain. Music was the thread that bound them together, a universal force that transcended all the differences between them. One afternoon, as she sat in a crowded market square, Lyra overheard a group of humans gathered around a small street performer. He was playing a guitar, his fingers expertly strumming the strings. His voice, rough and powerful, filled the air as he sang a song of heartbreak and hope. The crowd was mesmerized, swaying in time with the music, their faces soft with emotion. Lyra stood at the edge of the crowd, hidden in plain sight, watching their reactions. She could see the way the music affected them, how their expressions shifted with each verse, how they seemed to lose themselves in the melody. It was as though the music had a life of its own, connecting them in ways Lyra couldn't quite understand. The song ended, and the crowd erupted into applause. Lyra couldn't help but feel a strange sense of admiration for the performer. He had done something she could never do. He had made these humans feel something deep and powerful. And for the first time, she felt a pang of envy. She had never been taught to understand music the way humans did. She was an observer, not a participant. She had been trained to gather data, not to engage with the subject of her mission. But now, as she watched the people around her, their faces lit up with joy. She couldn't help but wonder, what would it be like to feel that way? To be moved by music in such a profound way? That night, after her observations, Lyra found herself wandering through the streets, unable to shake the feeling the music had left on her. She couldn't explain it, but something inside her longed to experience it for herself. She needed to understand what made it so powerful, so intoxicating. She passed by a small record shop, its windows glowing softly in the dark. The familiar hum of human music drifted out from inside. Lyra paused, staring at the shop's entrance. She had seen humans gather here before, purchasing music, laughing, and talking about their favorite songs. For a moment, she hesitated. She knew it wasn't part of her mission to get involved with their music, but curiosity won out. She stepped inside. The shop was filled with rows and rows of albums, each one a world unto itself. The walls were lined with posters of famous human musicians, their faces frozen in time. The air smelled of paper, ink, and the faint scent of Vinyl Lyra's eyes darted around the room, taking it all in. She felt a strange sense of excitement, as though she were about to embark on a new kind of mission, one she had never anticipated. A kind woman behind the counter smiled at her as she approached. "Can I help you?" she asked in a friendly tone. Lyra hesitated, unsure of what to say. She didn't want to draw attention to herself, but, at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to explore this strange world of music. I'm curious," she began slowly. "What kind of music do humans listen to?" The woman's smile widened. "Oh, we listen to all kinds of music. There's something for everyone here." "What are you into? Pop, rock, classical?" Lyra's mind raced. She had no idea what kind of music she was into. She had only observed humans' reactions, never understood them. "All of it," she said, feeling unsure of herself. "I want to understand it all." The woman chuckled softly. "Well, you've come to the right place." She handed Lyra a few albums. "These are some of the most popular right now. Take your pick." Lyra took the albums with a polite nod, unsure of how to proceed. The woman offered her a pair of headphones. "Take a seat," she said. "Listen, and let the music tell you its story." Lyra sat down at one of the small booths, placing the headphones over her ears. As the music began, she closed her eyes, allowing herself to be enveloped in the sound. The first album was a soft melody, filled with soothing strings and gentle percussion. It was peaceful, almost like a lullaby. Lyra felt her body relax, her mind quieting as the music flowed through her. Then the music changed. A new album began, one with a faster beat, a strong rhythm. The voices of humans filled her ears, their words full of energy and passion. Lyra's heart began to race, her fingers tapping along to the beat. She had never experienced anything like this before. She could feel the emotions in the music, the joy, the freedom, the celebration. It was infectious. And then came the third album. It was a slower, more somber tune, a haunting melody that seemed to speak of loss and longing. Lyra's chest tightened as the music wrapped around her like a dark cloud. The sadness in the song was palpable, and she found herself feeling it too. For a moment, she forgot where she was, lost in the beauty and sorrow of the music. The song ended, and Lyra sat in silence, her mind reeling. She had experienced something in those few minutes, something she could never explain. The music had made her feel alive, as though it had touched something deep inside her. She had come to Earth to observe, to study these humans. But now she realized that their music had changed her in ways she couldn't comprehend. As she left the shop that night, her thoughts were filled with the sounds she had just heard. Music was no longer just noise to her. It was a language, a way to connect with something greater than herself. It was powerful, moving, and somehow human. Lyra knew she couldn't go back to just being an observer. She had been touched by something she didn't understand, something that had begun to awaken feelings inside her that she couldn't control. She had come here to study humanity, but now humanity had found its way into her heart. The next few weeks were a blur for Lyra. Every day she observed the humans with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She couldn't help it. Music had become more than just something to study. It was something that pulled at her very core. She spent hours listening to songs, each one affecting her in a different way. Some made her laugh, some made her cry, and some made her feel things she couldn't understand. But all of them made her feel alive. She found herself returning to the record shop time and time again, listening to more music, talking to the kind woman behind the counter, who had quickly become one of her only human friends. The woman Mir had noticed Lyra's fascination with music and often recommended new albums, explaining their meanings and histories. Lyra had begun to trust her, though she couldn't share the truth of her mission. She could never reveal why she was really here. One evening, Mira invited her to a live concert, something Lyra had never experienced before. "It's going to be amazing," Mira had said with excitement. "There's nothing like hearing music. Liv, you'll understand what I mean once you're there." Lyra hesitated. Attending a human event wasn't part of her mission. She wasn't supposed to form connections with them, especially not in a way that involved emotions. But Mira's enthusiasm was contagious, and the curiosity burning inside her overpowered her logical reasoning. "All right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll go." The concert was held in a large outdoor amphitheater, with lights twinkling overhead like stars. The energy in the air was electric, as if the crowd itself was vibrating with anticipation. Lyra, though out of place in the sea of humans, felt a sense of excitement that was unfamiliar to her. As she stood at the back of the crowd, hidden in plain sight, she could see the performers on stage humans, just like the ones she had been studying. But now they were larger than life, their music filling the night air. When the first notes rang out, Lyra was struck by the sheer power of the sound. It was different from the albums she had listened to in the record shop. The music here wasn't just about the notes or the lyrics. It was about the energy, the rawness, the collective emotion that the crowd shared. The humans around her sang along, clapped their hands, and even danced, completely lost in the music. It was an experience she could never have prepared for. She felt the thump of the bass reverberating in her chest, the drums pounding in time with her heartbeat. It was as if the music was alive, breathing, moving through her. The lights flashed, the singers' voices soaring through the night, and Lyra felt her breath catch in her throat. She had never experienced anything so overwhelming. The crowd's energy, their unity, the way they fed off each other's emotions, was intoxicating. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Lyra felt like she wasn't just observing. She was part of something. The concert went on for hours, and Lyra couldn't tear herself away. As the night wore on, she found herself standing closer to the stage, her feet moving with the rhythm of the music. She wasn't just watching anymore. She was participating. The human emotions surrounding her, the joy, the excitement, the shared happiness began to settle in her own chest, spreading warmth through her. When the final song played, Lyra was on the edge of tears, her heart racing with emotions she couldn't explain. The crowd cheered, shouting for more, but Lyra stood there, caught in the aftermath of the music. It was as if her entire being had been shaken, rearranged, and put back together again. Mira found her afterward, her face flushed with excitement. "See, I told you," she exclaimed. "There's nothing like it. Music brings us together. It's magic." Lyra nodded, her throat tight. I felt it," she whispered. Myra smiled knowingly, her eyes bright. "I can tell. You found something that makes you feel, haven't you?" Lyra's mind raced. The music had made her feel more than she ever thought possible. She had come to Earth with a singular purpose: to observe, to analyze, to report. But now that mission seemed so distant. She wasn't sure who she was anymore. The emotions she had experienced at the concert, emotions that she couldn't fully understand, had begun to change her. She was no longer just an observer. She was becoming a part of what she had come to study. That night, as Lyra walked back to the secluded area where her ship was hidden, she felt conflicted. Her mission, the reason she had come to Earth, was slipping away. She was getting too close to the humans, too involved in their world. She had crossed a line, and she knew it. But what could she do? The music had awakened something in her that she couldn't ignore. It had changed her, and with it, everything she had been taught to believe about her mission, about her duty, felt uncertain. Lyra had come here to study humans, to learn about them from the outside. But now, she couldn't help but feel like she was part of them, like their emotions. Their music, their culture, had become a part of her. She stopped in the quiet darkness, the weight of her thoughts pressing heavily on her. Music had done this to her. It had made her question everything. She wasn't supposed to feel this way, but she did, and she couldn't undo it. Tomorrow, she would continue her mission. She would observe more humans, learn more, gather more data. But deep down, Lyra knew something had shifted. There was no going back to the cold, logical creature she had once been. The humans and their music had changed her forever. The following days were a blur for Lyra. She wandered the streets, observing the humans as she always had, but everything seemed different now. It wasn't just their behavior or their interactions, it was everything. She had been studying them, analyzing them for so long, but now she found herself feeling too deeply for them. She couldn't push the music from her mind, couldn't ignore how it had changed her as Lyra walked through the city. She noticed the humans around her seemed more vibrant, more alive than before. She saw them laughing together, talking, arguing, experiencing the range of emotions she had read about in her reports, but now they felt real to her. They weren't just data points to analyze anymore. They were people with stories, dreams, fears, and hopes. And through all of it, music seemed to be the thread that connected them. She had come here to gather intelligence. Her people needed to understand humans better. They needed to know how they thought, how they felt, how they interacted with one another. But now, Lyra wasn't sure if that was enough. It felt wrong to merely observe. She didn't want to remain a passive observer anymore. She wanted to be part of it. She wanted to experience what they felt, what they had. The problem was, she was here to spy, not to live. Her inner conflict grew with each passing day. It wasn't just the music anymore, it was everything. The way humans showed affection, how they cried for each other, how they celebrated their victories together. Lyra had seen their kindness and their cruelty, their moments of joy and sorrow, and she found herself caught in the tide of it all. It was so much more complicated than she had ever expected. And for the first time in her life, she felt helpless. Lyra knew she couldn't stay detached. She had already crossed that line. But what could she do? She had her mission. Her people were depending on her. Yet, she had started to form connections. She had started to care. One afternoon, as Lyra sat on a bench in a small park, she overheard a conversation between two humans. A young woman and man sat nearby, talking about a recent tragedy in the community. A child had fallen ill, and no one knew how to help. The woman spoke of her concern, the man of his helplessness, and Lyra felt a pang in her chest. The way they cared for each other, how their voices trembled with genuine fear, was a rawness she hadn't expected. She couldn't just watch them from a distance anymore. The man turned to the woman, his face filled with resolve. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice steady. "We're all in this together." The words echoed in Lyra's mind. We're all in this together. She had heard that sentiment before. Humans said it all the time. But now it made sense. It wasn't just an empty phrase. It was how they truly felt. They supported each other through everything because they were connected. They shared their burdens, their joy, their pain. Lyra had spent so long observing them, cataloging their actions, that she had forgotten something vital. Humans weren't just a species to be studied. They were beings to be understood, to be cherished. The realization hit her like a wave. She didn't just want to gather data about them. She wanted to be a part of it. She wanted to understand what it meant to be human, to feel everything they felt, to experience the music that had touched her soul. But how could she? Her mission was still ongoing. She was here to spy, not to get involved. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't go back to the way things were. She couldn't go back to being just an observer. Her emotions were no longer something she could control. The music had opened a door inside her, and now she couldn't close it again. Lyra's thoughts swirled, and she began to question everything. What if her people didn't need to know everything about humanity? What if there were things that were better left unknown, better left untouched? What if her presence here was only harming them, forcing them into a life of secrecy and fear? Her mind raced with the possibilities. But there was one thing she knew for sure: she couldn't continue with her mission the way she had planned. She had been sent to spy on humanity, but now she realized she was no longer just a spy. She was a part of their world, their music, their emotions. And that was a truth she couldn't ignore. One evening, as Lyra walked along a quiet street, she found herself at the very place where she had first heard the music that had captivated her. The small cafe was still there, its lights glowing warmly in the dark. She had spent many nights listening to the songs played by street musicians, letting the music fill her soul. But tonight was different. Tonight, she felt a sense of longing, as though the music called to her, asking her to make a choice. As she walked in, Mira was behind the counter, her face lighting up when she saw her. "Lyra," she greeted, smiling. "It's good to see you again. What can I get for you?" Lyra hesitated for a moment, her thoughts swirling. She had to make a decision, and she knew it. There was no turning back. "I need to talk to you," Lyra said quietly, her voice heavy with emotion. Mira's smile faded slightly, sensing the change in her. "Of course. Come on over, let's sit down." They sat at a small table, and Lyra struggled to find the right words. "I've been here for so long, studying humans, watching you all. I thought I was here to gather information, to understand you. But now I don't know what to do. I've seen the way you love each other, the way you care for one another. And the music. Mira, the music has changed me. It's made me feel things I never thought I would." Mira listened quietly, her eyes understanding. "I can see that. The music has a way of doing that to people. It's powerful." Lyra looked up, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "But it's not just the music, Mira. It's everything. It's how you live, how you care, how you hurt. I came here to watch, to stay distant, but now I don't know if I can." Mira took a deep breath, her gaze soft. "Lyra, you don't have to be alone in this. You've already experienced what it's like to connect. The music is just the beginning. Humans are messy, complicated, and full of flaws, but we're also capable of love and kindness. You've already found a part of that. You don't have to leave it behind." For the first time in weeks, Lyra felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had come here to complete a mission, but now she understood that her mission was changing. The music, the people, it had all become a part of her. And now she had to decide whether to walk away or to embrace it. To let the human experience fill her as it had filled so many others. She took a deep breath, knowing her journey had only just begun. Lyra lay awake that night, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Her mind raced as she replayed the events of the past few days over and over. She had always thought that her mission would be clear-cut, that she would study the humans, gather the necessary data, and return home, having completed her task. But now, everything was different. Music, emotions, connections, these weren't things she had been prepared for. She sat up in the dark of her small room, staring out of the window at the lights of the city below. Earth was alive in a way she had never imagined. The humans, in their bustling lives, filled with both joy and sorrow, seemed to be on a journey of constant discovery. And now, Lyra felt like she was on a similar path, but hers was tangled with confusion and uncertainty. She didn't know where it would lead, but she knew she couldn't go back to who she had been before. She had spent so much time observing the humans from a distance, cataloging their actions, analyzing their emotions, but now she found herself drawn to them in a way that felt personal. Myra's words echoed in her mind. You don't have to be alone in this. Lyra had been alone for so long, detached from everything and everyone. But now, for the first time, she felt the sting of loneliness in a way she never had before. And that sting was connected to someone more than just her. Mission, her thoughts turned to Mira, the kind woman who had introduced her to music, who had helped her begin to understand humans in a way she never could through data and analysis alone. Myra had become more than just a friendly human. She had become Lyra's bridge to the world she had once viewed as foreign and complicated. And now, Lyra found herself caring for Myra in a way that was impossible to ignore. It was strange, this feeling that had taken root inside her. She had spent so long pushing emotions aside, focusing only on the mission, that she hadn't realized how much she had longed for a connection. But now, it was clear humans weren't just objects to be studied. They were real, they were complex, and they were capable of love, kindness, and emotion in a way that Lyra had never experienced. The choice seemed so simple, yet so impossible. She could finish her mission as planned, return to her people, and report everything she had learned. She could provide them with data about humanity, about their emotions, their music, their culture. She could give them everything they wanted, but what would it mean for her? Would she be able to go back to the way she was before? Could she erase the emotions that had become so deeply ingrained in her? Lyra felt a deep sense of sadness wash over her. She knew that her people would expect her to return with the intelligence they needed. They would want her to be detached, unemotional, and objective. But how could she be that way now? How could she report on the beauty of humanity without feeling a deep, personal connection to it? How could she look at Mira, at the humans, and pretend that none of it mattered? Lyra stood up and walked to the small desk in her room, where she had been keeping a journal. She had started writing in it a few days ago, a way to organize her thoughts and her observations. Now, as she sat down to write, the words seemed to flow from her without much thought. I don't know what's happening. To me, she wrote. I came here to study them, to gather information. But now, I find myself caring. I find myself feeling things I never expected to feel. The music has changed me. The way humans connect with each other, how they love, how they hurt, it's all too much. I don't know if I can go back to the way I was before. I don't know if I can be the observer anymore. But I don't know how to be anything else. As she finished writing, Lyra set the pen down, her eyes filled with uncertainty. She had no answers. She didn't know what the right choice was, but she couldn't ignore the pull in her heart. It wasn't just the music anymore. It was everything. It was the humans, their emotions, their struggles, their joys. And it was Mira. Lyra had to make a decision, and she knew that it would shape the rest of her life. The music had opened a door, but it was up to her to walk through it. The next day, as the sun began to set, Lyra found herself walking through the familiar streets of the city, heading toward the cafe where Mira worked. She had made up her mind. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be what her people expected. But it was the only choice that felt right. When she arrived, Mira was behind the counter, as usual, her face lighting up when she saw Lyra. Hey you, Myra said with a smile. How are you feeling today? Lyra took a deep breath, her heart pounding. She knew she had to say this. She couldn't hide it anymore. Mira, I've been thinking a lot, Lyra began, her voice quiet but steady, about everything. About my mission, about you, about what's been happening since I got here. Mira raised an eyebrow, sensing the seriousness in Lyra's tone. What's on your mind? I can't do it anymore, Lyra said, her words coming out in a rush. I can't go back to just observing. I can't keep pretending that I'm not a part of this world, a part of what makes humans human. Myra looked at her with surprise. But there was something else in her eyes, something Lyra had never seen before. "You're talking about the mission, aren't you?" she asked softly. Lyra nodded. "I don't know what to do. I was sent here to spy on you, to study you. But now I don't want to just study you. I want to be a part of it. I want to be part of the music, part of the life you all live. I don't know what that means for me, but I can't go back to being the way I was." Mira reached out, placing a hand gently on Lyra's. "You don't have to go back. You don't have to be the same person you were before. You can be whoever you need to be." Lyra felt a weight lift off her shoulders as she looked into Mira's eyes. She had made her choice. The music, the human sieve, they had changed her, had led her to this moment. And now she was ready to embrace it. "Thank you," Lyra whispered, a small smile forming on her lips. "Thank you for showing me what it means to feel." Myra smiled back, her eyes filled with understanding. "You've been part of this world from the moment you arrived, Lyra. You just didn't know it yet." And for the first time since she arrived on Earth, Lyra felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had made her choice. It was no longer about gathering information. It was about living, about experiencing everything this world had to offer, and she was ready for it. Days turned into weeks, and Lyra found herself settling into a new routine. She no longer felt like a spy-an observer from the outside. She was part of the world now, part of the very thing she had come to study. Her bond with Myra deepened. And though Lyra still struggled with her conflicting emotions, she felt something that had once been foreign to her belonging. Mira was her guide. Her connection to humanity in a way that no data or observation could ever be. Together, they explored the city, visiting small concerts and gatherings, soaking in the music that had once haunted Lyra's thoughts. Mira often smiled when Lyra would close her eyes and let the rhythm wash over her. She had come to realize that music wasn't just about the sound, it was about the emotions it evoked, the way it brought people together, the way it made them feel understood. One evening, after a particularly stirring performance by a local band, Lyra and Myra sat on a bench outside the venue, the night air cool and crisp. Lyra's mind was still buzzing with the energy of the music, but tonight something felt different. There was a calmness to the night, a quiet that seemed to reflect the peace inside her. "I think I'm starting to understand," Lyra said softly, her gaze fixed on the twinkling stars above. "The way humans connect through music. It's so much more than I thought. It's not just sound, it's a way of sharing our deepest parts with each other." Mira smiled, her eyes glinting in the dim light. "Exactly. It's the way we express what words can't always convey. Sometimes the music is the only way to let someone else understand you." Lyra nodded, her thoughts drifting. She had spent so much time trying to stay detached, trying to remain objective. But now she realized that the real beauty of humanity lay in their ability to be vulnerable, to share their pain and their joy without fear. Music was just one way of doing that, but it was a powerful one. Over time, Lyra found herself becoming more and more involved in human life. She helped Myra at the cafe, learning to serve customers and interact with the regulars. She began to make her own friends, humans who knew nothing of her true nature. She even started attending community events, not as an observer, but as someone who wanted to be part of the experience. But there was still the question that lingered in the back of her mind. What would happen if her mission was discovered? What would her people do if they knew that she had abandoned her original purpose? Lyra had no answers. She had stopped thinking about it, stopped worrying about what would happen if she was caught. The more time she spent among the humans, the more she realized that the life she had once known, the life of detachment and cold observation, was no longer the one she wanted. One day, as Lyra walked through the park with Mira, she noticed something that stopped her in her tracks. A small group of children were gathered around an elderly man sitting on a bench. He was playing a violin, the soft, soulful sound drifting through the air. The children were mesmerized, their eyes wide with wonder as they listened. The elderly man's face was serene, his eyes closed as he played, lost in the music. For a moment, Lyra couldn't breathe. The connection between the children, the music, and the man was so pure, so simple, that it made her heart ache. She had seen this many times before, humans connecting through music, through shared experiences. But something about this moment was different. The man didn't care about the audience, about performing for anyone. He was playing because it was what he loved to do. The children didn't care about the man's age, his background, or anything. Other than the music he was sharing with them, it was a perfect moment of unity, a bond formed through the universal language of sound. Mira, noticing the expression on Lyra's face, stopped beside her. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said quietly. "Music has the power to bring people together, to make us feel like we belong." Lyra could only nod, her throat tight. She had felt it before, but now it seemed to resonate deeper within her. "It's more than just music," she whispered. "It's a way to connect, to understand each other without words. It's a way of saying, 'I see you, I feel you.'" Myra smiled gently. "That's exactly it. You understand now, don't you? Music is the way we share our hearts." Lyra looked at Mira, her eyes filled with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you. You've shown me something I never thought possible. You've helped me see that it's okay to feel, to connect, to be a part of this world." Myra reached out and squeezed her hand. "You've already thanked me, Lyra, by letting yourself be part of it." As the days passed, Lyra's connection to the humans grew stronger. She spent more time with Mira, and their bond deepened. It was no longer just about music. It was about friendship, about love, and about understanding the beauty of being human. Lyra no longer felt like an outsider looking in. She was part of something real, something that she could never have understood from a distance. And yet, there was still the looming question of her mission. She couldn't forget why she had come to Earth, even if she didn't want to go back to being the cold, detached observer she once was. There was still so much she didn't understand about humanity, so much she still needed to learn. But for the first time, Lyra felt like she was ready to face whatever came next, to embrace the unknown and the messy, beautiful journey that lay ahead. One night, as Lyra stood on the balcony of her apartment, looking out at the lights of the city, she realized something. She didn't have to choose between her mission and the life she had found here. Her mission had never been about detachment, about remaining distant and cold. Her mission, she realized, was to understand the depth of human emotion, the way music, love, and connection define them. And in doing so, she had found her own humanity. With a deep breath, Lyra made a silent vow to herself. She would continue to learn, to grow, to understand. She would share her experiences, her discoveries, with those who needed to know. But she would do so as someone who had felt, who had lived, who had loved. Because in the end, that was what being human was all about, and no matter what the future held, Lyra knew that she was no longer just an observer. She was part of the world she had come to understand. She had found her place, her music, and her heart. Lyra stood on the edge of the rooftop, the cool breeze brushing against her face. The city stretched out below her, its lights twinkling like stars scattered across a vast, endless sky. Everything felt different. Now everything had changed. She had arrived on Earth months ago with a clear mission: to observe, to gather data, to report back to her people. But now, as she gazed out over the bustling world she had come to love, she knew that mission was no longer her reality. The city felt alive beneath her, the music and laughter of its people filling the air. The hum of life was louder than it had ever been before. She could hear the faint strains of a song playing in the distance, a melody she had come to recognize as one of her favorites. The music had been her gateway to understanding humanity. It had shown her the beauty of their emotions, their connections, and their vulnerabilities. And through it, she had found herself. Myra's voice echoed in Lyra's mind. "You've found your place here, Lyra. You've found what it means to be part of something." At first, Lyra hadn't understood what that meant. I had been so focused on the mission, so committed to remaining objective that she had never allowed herself to truly feel. But now, everything had shifted. The music, the friendships, the moments of pure connection had all led her to this. She was no longer a detached observer. She was human, in every way that mattered. But there was still a part of her that struggled with the knowledge that her people, her planet, had sent her here for a purpose. They were depending on her. If she didn't return with the information, they needed everything she had learned. Everything she had felt would be wasted. They would expect her to report back, to give them the data they had asked for. And what would happen if they found out she had become too attached, that she had fallen in love with the music, with the humans, with the very thing she was supposed to be studying? Lyra closed her eyes, letting the wind blow through her hair. The decision had been weighing on her for days, pulling her in two different directions. She had already made the choice to embrace her feelings, to become a part of the world she had once viewed with detachment. But now, the final choice loomed before her. Could she continue the mission? Could she walk away from everything she had come to love in order to fulfill her duty? Or would she stay here, where her heart had led her, and find a new purpose? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see Mira walking toward her, a soft smile on her face. "You look deep in thought," Mira said, her voice gentle. Lyra smiled, her heart swelling at the sight of her friend. "I've been thinking about everything, the mission, what I've learned, and where I go from here." Mira nodded, her gaze steady. "You've come a long way since you first arrived. You've learned to feel, to connect with this world. But you're not just here to live. You're here to decide what it means to live." Lyra felt the weight of Mira's words sink in. "I know. And that's the problem. I've learned so much, but I don't know how to reconcile it all. I've seen the way humans live, how they share their lives with each other, and I've felt it. I've been touched by it. But I still have a mission. My people expect me to return with everything I've learned. I can't just ignore that." Mira stepped closer, her hand resting gently on Lyra's arm. "You don't have to choose between your mission and your heart, Lyra. You've already learned what they needed to know. Your people sent you here to understand humanity, but you've already understood something deeper. The way humans live, the way we love, is not something you can measure with data or facts. It's something you feel." Lyra looked at Mira, her eyes searching. "But if I stay, if I choose this life, will I be abandoning everything I've been taught? Will I be betraying my mission?" Myra smiled, her eyes soft with understanding. "Maybe you've been taught to see things in black and white, but there's more to life than that. You're not abandoning your mission, Lyra. You're embracing something greater than what they expected. You've learned what it means to be human, and that's something no one can take away from you." Lyra turned her gaze back to the city, her mind racing. The music that had once been an enigma to her now felt like a part of her. It had shown her the raw beauty of life, the way humans expressed their joys, their sorrows, their hopes, and their fears. She had seen the kindness they shared with one another, the bonds that were formed through music, through laughter, through simple moments. And now, she realized that was the essence of her mission, to understand what it meant to live. Her people had sent her here to study humanity, to gather data. But Lyra knew now that no amount of data could capture what she had learned. There were no words, no numbers, no measurements for the emotions she had felt, the warmth of a human touch, the joy of hearing music for the first time, the connection she had made with Mira and with the people around her. These were the things that mattered. Lyra took a deep breath, her heart filled with a sense of clarity. She didn't need to choose between her mission and her heart. She could choose both. She could take the lessons she had learned here and share them with her people, not as cold, distant observations, but as something personal, something real. She could return with a new understanding of humanity, a new perspective that went beyond data and facts. She could show them the beauty of life, the importance of connection, and the power of music. And maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to bring some of that beauty back to her people, to share with them what it meant to truly live. Myra stood beside her, watching the city with a knowing smile. "You've made your decision, haven't you?" Lyra nodded, her heart light. "Yes, I have." "Then there's nothing more to decide," Myra said, her voice warm. "You found your place here, and you found what it means to be alive." Lyra turned to Myra, a smile spreading across her face. "Thank you for everything." Myra smiled back, her eyes filled with affection. "You've always had it in you, Lyra. You just had to find it." Together, they stood on the rooftop, looking out at the city below. The music still drifted through the air, and Lyra realized that, in a way, she had found her own rhythm. She had found her own place in the world. And no matter what the future held, she knew one thing for certain: she was no longer just a visitor. She was a part of something far bigger than herself. And that was the greatest gift of all.